we've focused on those later stage kids because they just have the fewest treatment options available to them. In that population, we saw evidence of stabilization of the disease. In other words, the kids on our drug, on average, were not deteriorating.
All right, welcome back inside our proactive newsroom. And joining me now is James Garner. He is the CEO of Percheron Therapeutics. And James, it's good to see you. How are you?
I'm doing great, Steve. It's really good to be with you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Yeah, excited to learn a bit more about the company and what you're working on. Give me a little background on the company.
Steve, Percheron is a publicly listed biotech company. We focus on orphan diseases, so illnesses that are a little bit less common than diabetes and high blood pressure and lung cancer, things like that. And our primary focus right at the moment is on a disease called Duchenne muscular dystrophy. We've got a lead drug, avocasen, also known as ATL1102, currently in a phase 2 clinical trial in Duchenne. So really excited to see some data coming out from that soon.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about Duchenne muscular dystrophy and who it affects and what sort of the clinical trial is hoping to eventually and potentially help with Duchenne's disease.
Steve, Duchenne's a tough disease. There's no two ways about it. It's a
Yeah.
genetic disease of kids. And because of the way the genetics works, it's almost exclusively a disease of boys. And it's one of the more common genetic diseases, estimated at around 1 in 6,000, 1 in 7,000 live male births, which by the standards of these things is very far from a rare condition. Boys that are born with Duchenne lack a particular protein in their muscles called dystrophin. And as a result of that, every time they move their muscles, they cause damage to the muscles, and that causes chronic inflammation. These kids experience progressive muscle weakness from the age of about 4 or 5 years onwards. By the time they hit their teens, they're typically wheelchair bound, and life expectancy is in the mid-20s. So absolutely devastating condition for patients and for families.
James, is there any treatment right now? Is there anything that is can be done with these children?
See, we've got a number of treatments available, but look, the long and the short of it is there's really nothing that works great. We've got a few treatments that try to replace this missing protein, dystrophin, and they all succeed to some extent. In fact, last year we saw the first gene therapy approved for this condition, which was met with a great deal of excitement. But the trouble is, none of these drugs replace enough dystrophin. None of them replace dystrophin that's quite as good as the real thing. So that leaves us with anti-inflammatory drugs. And we've tended to treat these kids with steroids for the longest time. They're our kind of go-to anti-inflammatory drugs for a whole range of conditions. But they're replete with side effects, especially for young kids. So there's a real need for new treatments here. The clinicians really need some new tools in the toolkit. And that's where we hope our drug avocasen may be able to fit into
Yeah.
the treatment paradigm.
You mentioned obviously you're waiting for some data back. Give everyone a bit of an update on where ATL 1102 is at right now, what this trial is going, and then where that would lead after that.
Steve, we completed a couple of years ago a pilot study, just a sort of exploratory study in 9 boys looking at our drug in Duchenne. And in brief, the results seem really encouraging. We were actually looking at the roughly 50% of boys who've already reached the stage of being wheelchair bound. I mentioned earlier, tends to happen about the age of 12 or 13, roughly splits the population 50-50. And we've focused on those later stage kids because they just have the fewest treatment options available to them. In that population, we saw evidence of stabilization of the disease. In other words, the kids on our drug, on average, were not deteriorating. And certainly when we look at historical comparisons here, we would certainly expect over that period of time these kids to show some measurable deterioration in their function. So it gives us at least a really encouraging signal that this drug is slowing down, maybe even arresting the progress of the disease. So last year, we started an international phase 2b randomized controlled trial to really try and quantify this benefit. Much more robust study, the kind of data that regulators like FDA are looking to see. And we're going to see the initial readout from this study in December of this year, December 2024. We'll be seeing initial data from that trial. Much more to come in 2025, but our initial readout coming up in December.
Wow, it's going to be very interesting to see the data for sure. James, thank you so much. Very interesting company, and we're giving the best to you because it, as you mentioned, is a debilitating disease for these young children, especially on the boys' side. So appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Steve. It's been really good to talk.
All right, there's James Garner, the CEO of Percheron Therapeutics.